Hey, what's up everyone? This is Dean Palya. I created a website called atmosexpert.com, and the goal is to start creating some best practices, figure out how to use this tool creatively and how to use it to make better sounding music. Now, my main goal with Atmos, ever since I started creating in Atmos, is to create an Atmos mix that I think beats the stereo mix. And today is the first time that I've had a bit of a breakthrough, and I think I've gotten there, certainly in some aspects. So I'm going to play you the stereo mix first. Just take a listen to this passage.
Hey girl, come ride with me. Hey girl, get high with me. Up to the sky with me. Stay true, baby, stay true. No, stay true, don't lie to me. Down low, don't gotta be. So down low, but don't gotta be. I want your love. So baby, no hesitate.
Alright, so it's this pre-chorus section, big vocals. Now, that is the mastered version of this track. It's a very comparable mix and master in terms of loudness, in terms of timbre and balance, to a lot of R&B and hip hop. My early Atmos mixes. Take a listen.
Hey girl, come ride with me. Hey girl, get high with me.
It sounds, very quiet. Vocal sounds very distant.
Hey girl, come ride with me. Hey girl, get high with me. Up to the sky with me.
But you notice it actually sounds narrower than the stereo if I flip back and forth.
Hey girl, come ride with me. Hey girl, get high with me. Up to the sky with me.
I mean, even level matched, it doesn't really hold up. But right around here, I started messing around with this new technique, this new idea that I'm calling bed focus. And that was the breakthrough. I'm going to show you a little bit later, but take a listen now. I'm going to start on stereo, and then I'm going to flip back and forth to the Atmos version.
Hey girl, come ride with me. Hey girl, get high with me. Up to the sky with me. Stay true, baby, stay true. No, stay true, don't lie to me. Down low, don't gotta be. So down low, but don't gotta be. I want your love. So baby, no hesitating. No hesitating. So baby, no hesitating. I want you and I'm in your way. So baby, no hesitating. No hesitating. So baby, no hesitating.
So that's not level matched. That is the full volume of the master, the stereo master, and the binaural re-render. That's the full volume of the Atmos mix. It's not level matched. You can tell it's pretty much as loud. I mean, it might be a tiny bit softer, but it is very, very competitive in terms of volume, and very different than a lot of the Atmos mixes that we've heard to this point. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I was able to do this and what this technique is. But before that, take a listen here to some other sections with some more drums going on.
No expectation, ain't no pressure on me.
Yeah, let's back it up a bit.
I've been thinking we got some places to be. I hate to see you so lonely. Baby, come round with me. Baby, no expectation, ain't no pressure on me. Give a chance, girl, take it. Give a chance, girl, take it.
I mean, that passage right there, I think there's no comparison. The Atmos version is so much more alive sounding. It actually makes me feel the music so much more than the stereo version. You just feel the beat bouncing more. The sounds are cooler. The drum sounds cooler because it's not being masked. This part I'm super excited about.
I've been thinking we got some places to be. I hate to see you so lonely. Baby, come round with me. Baby, no expectation, ain't no pressure on me. Give a chance, girl, take it. Give a chance, girl, take it.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorder just so I can get my other session up. I'll show you exactly how I was able to do this and what my breakthrough in thinking was. So I forgot to say this earlier, but make sure you're listening on headphones to this video, otherwise it's not going to make any sense. That's because I'm obviously showing you the binaural render, which is how 80, 90+% of Atmos mixes are being experienced. Okay, so this is the Atmos mix. Just a quick tour. I've got all my vocals up here. Drums are in red, bass in brown, and then all my instruments in blue. I've got a couple send tracks down here as well. If you have any questions as I'm going through this, because I'm going to go kind of quick and I'm going to assume you've kind of used this system before, but if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will certainly answer to them and maybe even make a video if it's a question many people have. Before, when I was doing Atmos, let me see if I can just quickly pull up. I'm going to show you a different alternative here, one of my early Atmos mixes of this track. Okay, so this version, I've got bus 1 and 2, right? Obviously it looks different. Bus 1 and 2 are going into just my reverb and delay, right? That's just my reverb and delay send tracks. But here's the crazy thing. You know, everything that says stereo out here, that's going to the bed, right? This is going to the bed. Everything else, all these outputs, those are all objects. And I was experimenting. I was thinking, well, how do you make it sound bigger in Atmos, right? Well, you make everything an object, right? And you pan it out, and you put it over your head, and you put it in the back of the room, and you do all this stuff, right? And you assume that's kind of like what you would think would make it sound bigger and better. But it doesn't. It sounds much worse like that. It sounds small, narrow, quiet, distant, very distant. I'm going to flip back over now to my other better Atmos mix. I'm going to show you the difference. The difference is every track in this mix, with the exception of like 2 sounds, there's like a couple sounds that are objects. Everything else is going to a bed. You know, just to give a quick definition. So the bed is your, in this case, it's 10 tracks, it's 10 channels. It's my 7.1.2 array, right? So it's my 7 surround, my LFE, my sub, and then my 2 overheads. And that's the bed. Everything is going there. And it's not only going there one way. Now this is, I should note I'm using Logic 10.5.1. It's just the version I'm on. I haven't tried the 10.7 yet. I will definitely get there as soon as my new computer comes in. This is not intuitive when you start using Atmos. But if you go over to the Atmos Command I input configuration, you're going to notice the 10 tracks here. These are your beds. And you can see which channel they are. L, R, C, your sub, your left side surround, right side surround, right? And so you can even see it visually laid out here, right? Left side surround, left rear surround, right? And then these are your 4 overheads. Okay, so what's important is if you just leave everything in stereo out and it just goes out there, that's going out channel 1 and 2. And channel 1 and 2 goes to left and right. And that's it. It doesn't go anywhere else by default. You actually have to send it there using a send to an output. So that's why I've got output 3, which is my center track. I've got output 5-6, which is my sides. 7-8 is my rears. 9-10 I use sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes I use 9-10 because those are my 2 overhead channels. You can see those. I'm using these on some ad-lib vocals, right? Just for special effect. But this was a huge breakthrough in the sound. And I'm going to show you really quickly what happens. Let's just solo these vocals out.
Stay true, don't lie to me.
All right, so I've got all my vocal tracks, and I'm just going to take out, I'm going to pretend like I just have them going to, this is just going to left, right. Just going to the stereo out, left, right bed.
Stay true, don't lie to me. Download, don't gotta be.
Probably sounds familiar. It sounds like that Atmos distant vocal that you've probably heard on Atmos mixes. Now listen when I start adding in the different channels. So this is center, sides, and rear.
Stay true, don't lie to me. Download, don't gotta be. Say we download, but don't gotta be. I want your life. So baby.
all of a sudden it starts to sound like, that pro vocal sound that we like. That's what it sounds like. So take a listen here. I'm going to solo out each of the different parts of the bed. So this is the left, right. Here's the center and sub, technically. Here's the sides. Here's the rears. And here's the overheads. So you can see I'm reserving those overheads for very specific sounds. It's really just for like those special times when I want something to sound a little different, pull it out of the mix a little bit. Because they do sound a little weird. They add some weird timbre to it, just the binaural renderer does it. So that is the first main breakthrough in creating this Atmos mix that still feels close and big. There's another aspect. It has to do with the level, right? When you look at the Apple guidelines, they say -18 LUFS for the max level that you should ever do it, because that's what the binaural renderer needs and all that. And that's probably true technically, but it just doesn't sound as good. And I'm abusing this Dolby Atmos limiter here. You can see it's showing clipping. Doesn't sound like it's clipping. At least I haven't heard it yet. It definitely pumps. It sounds like it's pumping for sure, but it's not bad. Take a listen. Here, I'm gonna start from earlier on.
Overthinking, that's what they want you to be. They tell you stories they make up. Don't pay no energy. Time be wasted when you not rolling with me. You should be rolling with me.
So it's pumping a little bit more than I would probably like it to, in a perfect world, but I'm not like super upset with that. It sounds punchy, it sounds loud. It could probably be punchier, it could probably, not pump as much on the kicks, but I can always tweak with that. There's one thing to note is this Atmos mix has a lot more lows than the stereo does. That's one thing I'm experimenting with. The other thing I'm doing is I'm putting different EQ on my individual channels to kind of, separate things a bit more. So on my left, right, you can see I'm using soothe on certain things as well, just to make it a little bit more pleasant. But you can see, like my left, right, this is my left, right channel, doing a little sculpting just to kind of sweeten it up.
Overthinking, that's what they want you to be. They tell you stories they make up. Don't pay no energy.
Let's see here. On my center, I'm doing a multi-mono here. So on my center, I've got a little dip in the mids. It was just a little harsh. I wanted to just kind of spread the vocals a bit more. That's mainly what's in the centers. And the right just kind of, this is the sub channel. It's got a little bit of low end. Let's see what else we got going here. My sides, this is where it got more interesting. So I wanted it to just feel a little bit more lively. So I just kind of lifted it up, tucked some of the harsh frequencies.
Overthinking, that's what they want you to be. They tell you stories they make up. Don't pay no energy. Time you wasted when
that kind of same concept goes throughout the rears, and the overheads just kind of a much more subtle taming. That's another part of the equation. You can see I'm also adding a little bit of limiting, mostly just kind of managing peaks, not really doing too much level here. That's definitely part of it. Now, The other thing that I figured out was if you use the sub channel, it's unpredictable with the binaural renders. So if you put all your, like let's say you just send your kick and your 808 directly to the sub channel, it's harder to manage. It's also hard because, like, you know, depending on the genre, if you're working on hip hop, part of the sound that a lot of times you would go for is you kind of go for that like kick drum or 808 kind of saturating when it hits the limiter or when it hits the master bus, and it just kind of saturates and sounds nice and punchy that way. If you send it to the LFE, it's not going to do that because it's just not going to interact with the other tracks as much. So I had to actually modify, in order to get this to sound like the stereo mix, I actually had to modify the kick in 808. So I duplicated it, and you can see I just did some crazy EQ, and I sent it to some different channels here. Same thing with the, I did the same thing with the kick. You know, I rolled off the lows, actually distorted it a bit, just to give it that crispy sound that we're used to hearing. So that's what I figured out so far. I'm definitely pretty happy with how this is sounding. So I hope this is helpful. I literally am just, you know, doing this today, figuring this stuff out, and trying to just figure out how to make it sound better in Atmos than in stereo. So hit me up with any questions. Visit atmosexpert.com, or if you have something to share too, if you've got techniques or best practices that you're finding for making your Atmos stuff sound good, hit me up. I'd love to have you contribute.